You know, if for pure practicality, I would, eat a piece of Brandon Sanderson's liver. I said to him once, I'm like, could you quit writing so fast? You make me look like a real chump.
That's okay.
Whether it be sooner or later, death comes for us all.
This is true in both our world as well as in the Cosmere. Death has arrived for everyone from Ozymandias to preservation. Most people are willing to accept their time when it comes, choosing to meet death with grace and dignity.
And then there's Kelsier. Known as the survivor of Hathsin, the Sovereign, Thydakar, and the Lord of Scars, Kelsier has never taken no for an answer.
He has confronted nobility and the very gods themselves and forced them all to accept that when he chooses to, he survives.
And he always chooses to survive. Bookborn and I are going to take a deep dive into the survivor's character and analyze his life, his death, the themes surrounding him, and his future in the Cosmere. Kelsier was born on Scadrial to two presumed nobles near the end of the Lord Ruler's reign, and near the end due to him playing an integral role in the Lord Ruler's demise, as well as the ensuing collapse of the continent's socioeconomic structure.
And while this guy accomplished quite a bit in his lifetime, he isn't the type to let a silly little thing like dying get in the way of his aspirations. We can trace his insane drive all the way back to his childhood, when his noble father killed his Ska mother.
Side note, a Ska is basically just a genetically modified commoner. Typically, Ska do not possess allomantic abilities, which is one of the reasons why the nobles are so obsessed with keeping bloodlines pure, to keep a hold on their power structure.
This, of course, did not stop nobles from intermingling, and when they did, the Ska mothers were to be executed so as not to let any of the mistborn powers end up outside the hands of nobility.
While this cruel tradition of killing Ska baby mamas was barbarically common during the Lord Ruler's time, it turns out that it still kinda sucks to hear your mom was killed by your father. And so, while Kelsier and his brother Marsh did manage to escape with their lives, the whole event instilled within them a deep hatred for the noble class.
They spent the better part of their youth on the streets, doing some crime. And while Marsh was a seeker, a misting that could burn bronze to seek out allomancy, Kelsier had no allomantic abilities, and thus had to rely on his intellect and wits to survive. He found a respite to the chaos with his marriage to a Tinai named Mare, who dreamed of flowers. Or, as I assume she would put it, strange colorful plants that don't grow on Scadrial because it's raining toxic ash all the time. Rust and ruin this planet really sucks.
The couple made a fantastic thieving duo until they made the mistake of breaking into the palace of the Lord Ruler himself. Here, they found a group of Steel Inquisitors waiting for them, who thanked Mare for betraying Kelsier. While this was technically true, as Mare's allomancy had been detected by the Inquisitors, it had not been intentional in any way on her part. And when they were sent to the pits of Hathsin together, she sacrificed her life to keep him alive.
Remember earlier when I said Kelsier didn't have allomantic abilities? Turns out I lied. Gotcha. Upon seeing his wife beaten to death, Kelsier snapped, which is both metaphorically accurate and a technical term which here translates to his latent allomantic abilities were finally unleashed.
This caused him to realize he was a full Mistborn, and Kelsier more or less went on a killing spree that saw him decimate the leadership at the pits of Hathsin, and, once again, escape with his life. And while he did escape, it should be noted that he was left with a permanent reminder from this experience, emerging with both arms crisscrossed with scars as a result of his time fishing for atium in the pits. From here, he was trained in his powers by a man named Gemmel, and he made it his life's mission to see Mare's dream of flowers fulfilled.
But in the meantime, he figured he should do a little crime. And if his goals were accomplished along the way, all the better. So, he meets up with some of the Ska rebels, his brother Marsh included, and is hired to help them take down the Lord Ruler himself. Piece of cake, right? Well, it probably wouldn't have been quite as easy if he hadn't met a young girl named Vin, who is just the best. He trains her and helps her to grow as both a Mistborn and a human, generally taking her under his wing and bringing her along on several jobs and clandestine errands.
He introduces her to the rest of the crew, at this point including Marsh, Ham, Breeze, Dox, Orisur the Khandra, and some Farukamus dude from Terrace named Sazed. Together, they formulate and carry out a plot to destroy the noble houses from within, weakening the Lord Ruler's grasp on his people as well as eliminating many of the upper-class mistings.
During this time, Kelsier takes on a ton of the work himself, acting primarily as a recruiter and spiritual leader for the rebellion as well as the Ska army. Oh, did I forget to mention the Ska army? That might be because they all just got murdered because of their idiot leader Yiden deciding to attack too early. Whoops. Well, Kelsier's been honing his power and working on his contacts back home. Things can't be that bad, right? Well, let's check.
Okay, looks like he's been able to fracture the noble ruling class, so good start. He's also been able to foment unrest among the Ska, so more points for Team Rebellion. Oh shoot. It looks like a ton of Ska have just been arrested though, and are gonna be executed. What should Kelsier do? Option A.
Be a good citizen, let out a few tut-tuts and go on his merry way.
Option B.
Send out some thoughts and prayers.
Option C.
Do some crime.
Kelsier, of course, chose option C. I mean, his answer is crime. It's always crime.
But crime in the name of the people. Kelsier races to the square where the Ska are about to be executed, gets in a fight with a Steel Inquisitor, and after a hearty fight, Kelsier beheads the Inquisitor, which just doesn't ever happen. Inquisitors are martially formidable, and picking a fight with one is pretty much seen as a death sentence. But he manages to not only pull it off, but to do it with style. And then, of course, the Lord Ruler himself shows up.
Kelsier, feeling cocky, burns the 11th medal, something that's been built up the entire book as a secret weapon and which promptly accomplishes nothing. Having failed, Kelsier dies by the Lord Ruler's spear.
In any sane situation, this is where Kelsier's story would end.
Luckily for us, Brandon Sanderson is far from sane.
Upon his death, Kelsier's bones were taken by the Kandra named Orsur, who then appeared to the people, inspiring the hope in them to continue their rebellion. And continue they did, as Kelsier's return sparks the hope that he bet it would in Luthadel, where it prompted Kelsier's protege Vin to kill the Lord Ruler that very night.
Kelsier's duty to the rebellion fulfilled, it was time for the real work to begin. And while it took 2 more books worth of content and a literal apocalypse to accomplish, upon Sazed's ascension to Harmony, flowers were seen on Scadrial once more. But what was Kelsier up to this whole time? Well, other than being dead, the answer is a hell of a lot.
Remember, Kelsier is the survivor of Hathsin, and wasn't going to stay down without a fight. When he was killed, his cognitive shadow appeared in the cognitive realm, where he began to transition to the beyond. Preservation appeared beside him and calmly explained that as a god, it was his responsibility to be by Kelsier's side while he transitioned to the beyond. After hearing that there was, indeed, a god, Kelsier punched him in the face.
After Kelsier clocked God, he desperately began searching for a way to continue existing. Fortunately, the god of preservation was handy, and while he was a bit ticked off that this dude had just beamed him, he did see the merit in keeping Kelsier alive. So he preserved him, pushing his cognitive shadow into the Well of Ascension and stabilizing it so that he would not be sucked into the beyond.
In the Well of Ascension, he was bored for quite some time, though he did eventually end up in a fight with Hoyd, presumably because he had nothing better to occupy his time. Plus, he hadn't been able to do any crime for a while and was chomping at the bit. After Ruin was released from the Well, Kelsier was able to roam freely and so trekked to the far reaches of the Scadrian cognitive realm, encountering Naz and Chris along the way. He found a fortress populated by members of the Ire and successfully tracked them once they left their sanctuary. One of the members had an orb full of connection to preservation, which would have presumably allowed them to take up the shard of preservation.
But the survivor of Hathsin took one look at this and said, nope. This is a fantastic opportunity for some crime. And so, he stole the orb and brought it back to an admittedly weak preservation. The god told him to smash it himself and ascend, but only in order to temporarily hold it for Vin, the actual intended vessel for preservation. And Kelsier kept his word and handed preservation off to Vin as soon as the opportunity presented itself. After Vin tragically perished in her final fight with Ruin, Sazed took up both the shards Ruin and Preservation, ascending to form a new one he calls Harmony.
It can be assumed that Kelsier thought Sazed would be more of a pushover than the previous owners of the shards, and in a sense, he wasn't wrong. At this point, he was incredibly sick of the cognitive realm and started looking for ways to get back into the physical one. He appeared to his former crew member Spook, and together they began experimenting with hemalurgy as a way to give Kelsier a new body. Harmony wasn't happy about this, but Kelsier had never really been one to care about what gods thought about him, and besides, crime is a lot harder to do in the cognitive realm. Plus, how was he supposed to enjoy his new religion from there?
Oh, right. We should probably explain that. After Kelsier, that is to say, Orisur in Kelsier's form, reappeared to the people of Luthadel, a few of them got it in their heads to make a religion out of his little prestige act. They called it Survivorism, and it remains a prominent religion in Mistborn's second era.
Speaking of the second era, we only see Kelsier once during this entire era, where he pops up at the very end of Bands of Mourning, helping the people of Southern Scadrial to, you guessed it, survive. He's been very busy in Southern Scadrial, where he apparently was some sort of ruler named the Sovereign for a time, and even formed, or at least co-opted, a group named the Ghostbloods, which he leads by the name Thaddeker. I personally lean towards the idea that he founded it, as he is a literal ghost, and hemalurgy is a big part of how he got his new body.
I mean, ghost, blood. Either way, he's definitely in charge now, which has some pretty big implications. In fact, he's been using his agents on Roshar to figure out a way to get himself off planet, as well as heal a mysterious illness that he's suffering from. But before we talk about what's next for Kelsier, let's look at his overall character and connected themes.
The biggest and most important themes revolving around Kelsier is that of survival. He survived the pits of Hathsin, which alone is an impressive feat and would top anyone else's resume. But this is Kelsier we're talking about, so at best it's like third on the list.
Well, come on, he was chosen by Preservation himself to be shoved into the well, meaning he literally survived death. He also appeared as the survivor of the flames, you might know him as Spook, in his time of need. And he also gave away a shard and survived, which I'm not sure has ever actually been done before.
He even helped the Southern Scadrians to survive when it seemed that all hope had been lost. And while this is speculation, I have seen it suggested in several places online that Kelsier might even have been given a Dawn Shard when he was preserved, possibly one having to do with stasis, survival, or endurance. While this would fit quite nicely with his character's will to stay alive, there is also a fair amount of evidence against this, as the language is markedly different between Risen and Kelsier's experiences with alleged Dawn Shards. Let's put a pin in that for now.
Another major theme surrounding the Lord of Scars is that of secrets, both those surrounding him as well as those he keeps. He keeps talking about how there's always another secret, and makes it very clear to the crew, and Vin in particular, that there is much about himself that he keeps from them. While I'm sure this was intentional, the novella written about him is literally named Mistborn Secret History. It's literally a history of some of the secrets he's been keeping.
And while this is unconfirmed, I'd wager that there are quite a few secrets that he's keeping from Harmony. Secrets about his hemalurgy experiments, secrets about the Ghostbloods, maybe even secrets about the Southern Scadrians themselves. We just don't know enough about the relationship there yet. I mean, you could even say it's a secret. The last major theme of Kelsier's life, or let's say existence, is religion. He spends a good portion of the first Mistborn book setting up his Resurrection Act. And while it is definitely a backup plan, it should be noted that he has accepted that it could take his death to inspire hope in those surrounding him. And he's okay with that. He had no idea that a religion would spring up around this act.
And yet, it did. Survivorism is first mentioned in the Well of Ascension, and while it is only a loose grouping of individuals during the First Era, it has exploded into a full structured religion by the beginning of the Second. We have no idea what the man himself thinks of this, but he is definitely in position to take full advantage of the religion that's grown around him, should he ever choose to.
Which brings us to our next section. So, what comes next? The biggest question on everyone's mind is, where does Kelsier go from here? Well, let's take another look at some of his open plot threads. Firstly, he's in charge of the Ghostbloods, giving him access to a vast network of Cosmere informants and operatives.
He's also looking to expand the Ghostbloods and is actively poaching members from other organizations such as the 17th Shard.
Next, he has a whole religion based on his actions in the northern Scadrian continent, and has been a leader of the southern Scadrians in the past. He is trapped on Scadrial and is actively looking for a way off.
He's also suffering from a mysterious affliction, though we know little about what this exactly entails.
Since this section is highly speculative, both Lore and I are going to have different opinions as to Kelsier's direction from here. So without further ado, let's dive right into that sweet tinfoil and speculate wildly about what lies in store for everyone's favorite Mistborn.
So, what can we glean from all this? I think that we can safely say at this point that Kelsier is going to be sticking around for a while. If you can punch a god in the face and then convince him to give you eternal life in the next breath, you're probably not going to be dying anytime soon. We can also count on Kelsier being a major force when it comes to Cosmere-wide espionage. Remember, he is not only the Ghostbloods, but an entire planet's worth of potential operatives. If he chooses to somehow weaponize his religion, as well as his southern followers, he could form a force to be reckoned with in the Cosmere conflicts to come, and all without having to get Harmony's approval for any of his actions. Indeed, he might be building this network specifically so that he doesn't have to get Harmony's approval, because Harmony's become paralyzed to the point where it is questionable how much help Harmony would actually be in these conflicts. This, of course, leaves Kelsier's affliction. Since he's been trying to get his hands on a herald, which is its own can of worms, we know that he's desperate for a cure. And while we don't have any definitive answer as to what's harming him, we can presume that it's similar to those that have lived incredibly long lives, such as the Fused or Hoid. Hoid gets around this by using breaths to store memories, but the Fused provide a good example of how sane one is when they don't have an outlet for old, stinky memories. That is to say, not sane at all. Maybe Kelsier is dealing with this, and maybe he isn't. But we know he's trying to find a way to transfer both investiture and people off of the planets that they're connected to. More likely than not, this is somehow tied into either his affliction or its cure, and if he develops a way to, facilitate interdimensional trade in the process, well shoot, even better for him. With any luck, we'll even see him make an appearance in the second half of the Stormlight series. I have my hopes, but we'll be keeping my hype levels low for now in that regard. Either way, we can consider the entire Cosmere to be put on notice because Kelsier is back, and his machinations are going to become apparent sooner rather than later.
I couldn't agree more with Lore of the Earth that Kelsier is sticking around. As one of my very favorite characters in the Cosmere, it hurts me a little bit to admit that I think he may become a major villain in the Cosmere later on. And if not a villain, then at least a major antagonist to our Stormlight Archive characters, which has kind of been set up through the Ghostbloods. One of the most interesting things about Kelsier to me is his willingness to do what he thinks is right at any cost. He is all about the ends justify the means. But my question is what are Kelsier's goals right now? We learned in Rhythm of War from the conversation with Kaladin and Vasher that cognitive shadows often become less and less like their former selves the longer they go. Sometimes they get obsessed with like a single idea. So is Kelsier the same person we know and love? Is he same that charismatic leader? Or has he changed a lot? Is he holding on to old stinky memories like Lore would say? Another showdown I'd really like to see is one between Taravangian and Kelsier. I think they both share a little bit of a similar personality trait, is that they tend to only care about their own. We had Kelsier, who was all about the ska, not caring how many noblemen got hurt. And then we have Taravangian, who was like, okay, only Carbaranth can be saved, I guess that's fine. So I wonder if they went head to head what the collateral damage would be, and is Kelsier still only concerned with the people on Scadrial, and who is Taravangian concerned about? Either way, I think they will only try to protect their own, whoever their own is, and so I think that would be a very interesting interaction. And I think it's pretty possible that they could interact, since it seems that Kelsier has no problems confronting gods and probably would like to confront gods, so I'd be very interested in that. Whatever the end to the Stormlight Archive 5, I honestly predict that Kelsier will be with us in the back half. I think he's going to be a major player, and as my very first favorite character in the Cosmere, I couldn't be more excited to see where he leads us.
No matter what happens in Kelsier's story, we can be sure that he's going to have a very large part to play in the future of Scadrial and the Cosmere as a whole.
And while we might have to wait a bit to get more information on his plans, we can rest assured that he's left us with plenty of mysteries to unravel.
After all, there's always another secret. Okay, that wraps up Kelsier's history, as well as my first collaboration video on the channel. I'd like to give a huge thank you to Bookborn for joining me, and I encourage all of you to go check out her channel. There's a ton of great content there. Now, I particularly enjoyed her characters tier list, which you can check out right in the top corner of this video. Yeah, right there. Click it. Thank you all for joining us, folks. Rust and Ruin, I've had fun going over all that with you. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for some quality creme posting, as well as general updates. Have a fantastic day, folks. In the can.